Last of Us, Ian and Mark.
Yeah, Last of Us.
All right, that's enough of that.
All right.
We'll go some chill vibes, and we'll chat over it. What's going on? This is the last episode of our live coverage of The Last of Us. So it's The Last of Us. Maybe we'll let you decide if you like this format, and if you do, leave a comment, and maybe we'll bring Mark on to the show more often. And I can go back to my regular scheduled programming, whatever. Might be The Last of Us, might not. Who knows?
Yeah, could be the last of our friendship, man. This is what
this is it,
keeps
dude.
us together. So if
And
not, man,
funnily
it's been great.
And funny enough, we have our birthdays are one day apart, so it's just like it's the perfect birthday present to be like, fuck
That's
you,
true.
we're not friends
Yeah.
anymore.
Happy almost birthday, by the way.
Yeah, you too. Happy almost birthday. Actually, no, not happy almost birthday because you're not my friend anymore.
True. All right. Well, it's been nice.
All right. So The Last of Us. Let's talk about that last episode and then maybe get into a bit of like the themes that we saw there and then how they kind of end cap the whole season. Again, if you don't know, if you haven't watched previous live streams, Mark has played the game. I have not. And so that is the analysis and the lens through which we look at the show and how we discuss it here.
Yeah, I'd like to bring up, I'm kind of sort of wearing Ellie's outfit towards the end of the game here in the game version. So, you know.
Uh-oh. Hold on, we have a special guest. We have a special guest. Come here. This is not scheduled. Come here. Who's that? That's Mark.
Hello.
Can you say hi, Mark? Say hi.
Hi guys.
Hi. Hi, friend.
All right, go to bed. Go to mommy. No, Daddy's not coming. Daddy's doing a live stream. Worst timing. All right, Mark, do you want to get started and start? I'm listening. Do you want to get
Yeah,
started with your
absolutely.
discussion and your analysis on this? Why?
Yeah,
Figure out
sure.
what's going on here.
So what I figured we'd do is kind of just start from kind of the beginning of the episode here, which for me, honestly, was the most powerful. Well, not the most powerful, but there was a lot of information that was jam-packed in there. Starting with that big scene where we see Ellie's mom. So, you know, she's running from what we imagine is a bunch of infected or maybe one infected. She goes to this safe house or house of sorts. And we see her lock herself in a room, battling, you know, obviously she's pregnant. She's battling against an infected and she gets bit. So really big, significant moment here. We see a lot of backstory with where Ellie came from and potentially why exactly she is immune to the cordyceps virus.
So
Yeah.
So one thing that I thought was really cool was the way that they took Ellie from the game and made her the character of Ellie's mom in the show.
Yeah.
And I was like, you look like you could be her mom, like the character's mom. Like the casting just seemed to line up perfectly.
Yeah, that was really sweet, man. I love that. You know, obviously we've seen that a few times. I mean, I guess now's a good time to bring up that Marlene, the voice of Marlene, is also the character Marlene in the show. You know, I think that that's a great choice. I think it also shows how closely that everyone was working together with the game producers, the developers, and really how big of a role that they had in making this come to life. And you can see how true that they were to the game. So again, really good to see there.
Yeah. Yeah. And one of the things that I was kind of thinking about that opening episode, obviously, I don't know if it is done the same way in the game. You'll have to answer that. But just like the way that that the cordyceps, as you sort of touched on before, I'm still getting my head wrapped back into the live stream because dad stuff.
Yeah.
But when she gets bit in the leg, that somehow has some kind of impact on Ellie's immunity. I know you were starting to touch on that a little bit, but is that kind of how it's done in the game?
You know, I'll be honest, I can't remember how they brought that up. That particular scene, I don't remember it being in the game, but it does give us a little bit of backstory. And I've heard that they do maybe go into it a little bit in season 2. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, and I think it's good to touch on maybe a little bit of the science of what's going on there in terms of how she may become immune. But obviously we see that, I think her name was Anne. So Ellie's mom. when Marlene finds her, she's holding the baby, and she says, "Hey, I severed the umbilical cord. She was born after I got bit, essentially. So, hey, no worries here. She's safe. Don't worry. It's just me." Which obviously she's trying to protect her child. Marlene is obviously suspicious. We can go into how much she knows at this point or not, but she's obviously trying to protect Ellie. Good moment there. In terms of kind of getting the backstory.
Yeah, one thing too that I think it sets up as a theme for the episode is lying to protect your children. So obviously Ellie's mom lies to protect Ellie, but then we see that kind of come full circle with Joel towards the end of the episode. I might be skipping around, but we see that come full circle towards the end of the episode as well, where Joel lies to protect Ellie, although he does it to Ellie directly. But I want to get into the theme of choice a little bit. I know you had some thoughts on that, and I had some thoughts on that.
Yeah, absolutely. This was really, really big for me. We have a lot of choice in this episode, and then obviously throughout the entire series here. But I personally looked at this just from the episode, and then I kind of extrapolated out. But we have the choices that we see that Joel and Marlene make, and kind of how those two really sometimes they coincide, and then sometimes they obviously really differ, as we see in those final scenes. And then also we have Ellie as well. So I think the way I was thinking about doing this is maybe just touching on each one separately. A lot of choices, a lot of kind of illusions of choices, because people come in with biases. You see that a lot as well, where you may think that you're making a choice based on the information that you have right in front of you. But looking at Joel throughout the series, he's more predisposed to make a choice based on how he has been in the past, how, the experiences he's had, whether it's been with his own daughter, whether it's been with the bad choices that he's made that's led him here, and then, all the way throughout, even after meeting Ellie and all that. So, yeah, man, just curious to see what you're thinking in terms of these choices. Take it away, dude.
Yeah. So the way I saw the theme of choice coming up was part of sort of, I think, a larger piece of the narrative. So obviously towards the end, Joel has this opportunity to save humanity, right? He has the choice to save humanity or to save Ellie. And he chooses to save Ellie, of course. But I think what's more interesting is that, like, it's not only him who makes that choice, but he's depriving Ellie of the choice, right? And I think not only is it showing that to him, her life is like, it's not, he has to decide whether to sacrifice Ellie for the greater good. And he doesn't think that Ellie's life is worth the greater good, or rather the greater good isn't worth Ellie's life, right? So he is refusing to give her up, and he's making that choice while she is kind of unconscious and doesn't have the opportunity to make that choice for herself. But I think what is kind of shown here a little bit too is that, like, it's actually not that he's only prioritizing her life, but also that, like, the way that he kills all of the people in the process of saving Ellie shows me that, okay, it's not just about the greater good. It's actually that it's not that he sees saving one life as being just as important as the greater good, but rather he's willing to let millions of people die, hundreds of people die, and in the compound itself, a few dozen people die, just to save Ellie. So he kills these countless people, and he does it with such disregard for their own sort of individuality, and he does it without any kind of regard towards, like, what their lives could potentially mean to somebody, right? I mean, I think about, this might just be me being overly empathetic, but I think about how some of those soldiers who are protecting Ellie at the end, or not protecting her, but rather trying to stop Joel, might have Ellie's of their own in their own lives, and he's depriving everybody of everything because he wants to protect her. And that is very much rooted in his trauma, right? Where his trauma has helped him survive to this point, and it's helped him make the right decision for Ellie all along the way. But now I think that sort of moral direction is being challenged a bit, right? Because now he's almost holding the world back because of his personal trauma, and he's taking other people's choices away, and that's sort of the damage of the trauma that he has.
Yeah, I think it's definitely easy to kind of make the argument that he doesn't really give a shit about that, just because he's always been, at least from what we've seen, kind of selfishly looking at himself. Like, what is a human life to him? You know? And throughout this kind of series, we see that he really does he is able to regain his humanity and say, okay, there is something greater than myself out there. You know, he is a father. And I think throughout this episode, especially, we see that those fatherly instincts start to come back. And I think this part's interesting too, because we can get into kind of the illusion of choice that Ellie has. And I definitely want to talk about that a little bit more. But, you know, as a father, you know, when do you let your child make their own choices? You know, when do you think that they are capable of making their own choices in a way that may not be detrimental to them? You know, that's a good question. And I don't know. I mean, do you have an answer for that? Like, when would you let your daughter kind of make those choices for herself?
I think your number one responsibility as a parent is to protect your child. And I think I see that very much in Joel, right? And so there is no point at which you would kind of let your child make a decision that would result in their death or harm to them, right? Like, to some degree, you know, harm is a learning tool, but that's like the ultimate. Death is the ultimate form of there's no coming back from that. There's no learning from that. So I don't know. I mean, and I also think about just as like a partner in a relationship, would I ever let my partner make a choice that would result in her death? I don't know. You know what I mean? I don't think I ever would. She's a fully grown adult who's capable of making her own choices, but I still, if I was like, you know, you do that, you go drive in a blizzard or whatever, you're going to hurt yourself. I'm not letting you do that, you know?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't know, there's some degree of that, but I also think, I mean, I just totally, as a dad, I totally looked at that whole scene. I was like, would do the same fucking thing. Yeah. Like, absolutely would just murk these sons of bitches if they were going to hurt my daughter. But I think what's interesting about Joel is that a father is all that he is. And that's what I started to see. Let me know if you disagree with this, but I go back to the attempted suicide that was revealed in this episode, right? Where it was like, he was like, after my daughter died, it was like 2 days later, I tried to blow off my own head, but I flinched and then I missed. And I was like, okay, so there's like this impulse in Joel to survive at all costs, like that he almost has no control over, right? This desire to continue to live. And I think where that kind of but like after that moment, he's not the same. And he implies like, I wasn't saved until I met you, essentially. He doesn't say that directly, but it was like, she was like, how long did it take to like get over that trauma? And he was like, not until I met you.
Yeah.
Right. And then so Ellie is everything to him and he's happy. He's like, tell me more of your jokes that he couldn't stand earlier in the season. And then now when she is threatened, it's not just that her life is threatened for her sake, but her life is threatened for Joel's sake, because Joel is like, who am I going to be if I don't have Ellie anymore?
That's his identity. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think yeah, exactly. That's his identity. So I think that's where I sort of see it going, is that it's not necessarily just a protect Ellie for Ellie's sake, but like protect Ellie for my sake, because I don't know who I am if I'm not a father. Yeah.
Yeah. I think he, you know, he's always kind of followed his own moral compass. And this is what makes Joel so compelling for me, is that he's able to do, I mean, we can sit here and kind of debate whether or not Joel does the right thing and at what cost. But I think that because he has his own moral compass and because of the decisions he's made in the past and, you know, how he's able to do something at all costs, no matter what level of violence he has to kind of, exude to that point, there's something very redeemable in that. That last scene is really, is really powerful because on paper you can say, okay, he just sacrificed everything for this one person. He, this was humanity's last chance. Creating a vaccine, saving millions of people, hundreds of thousands, however many, for this one individual, killing all these people, killing Marlene, lying to Ellie, all these things that on the surface are just so wrong, but you kind of look at why he's doing it and you kind of say, okay, I guess I understand. I guess I sympathize with it. Now, I will say, they kind of sped through things a little bit, and we can kind of get into the differences between the game and the series here, but I was a little less compelled with that portion just because it was such a quick process. But you still feel it. You still feel the internal struggle that he has, where he's fighting with what to do internally. Even taking that choice away from Ellie, he knows what she would do throughout that whole process. And I don't know, maybe now's a good time to talk about Ellie's choices, her lack of choices, and where that leads her, Before
we do that, though, I want to touch on something, two things that you said. One is sort of willing to sacrifice for her at all costs. And that, I think, shows that he's even willing to damage his relationship with his daughter in order to protect her. Because when you look at the course of the season, he has built so much trust and goodwill with Ellie, and he throws all of that out the door at the end when he lies to her. You know what I mean? And that goes back to sort of that theme of Ellie's mom lying to protect her, and now Joel lying to protect her.
Well, and I would say the other thing about that, and that last scene specifically, where she's asking me, like, swear to me that, what you're telling me is true. I almost feel like she also knows the truth. But maybe it's kind of there's a duality there where she didn't say, I believe you. She said, okay, maybe she knows the truth, but she's like, I care for this man so deeply. I want to believe him, or maybe I will follow him at all costs. So just like how he's lying to her for this, she wants to believe that this is the reality, because what reality exists where she finds out that this is not the truth?
So that leads me to my second point that I want to touch on, which I don't know if this is like what it was meant to be, but I just got the vibe the whole time that Ellie chose to go under. Like maybe she was told prior that, hey, this is what's going to happen to you or whatever. And maybe she did make the choice and we just don't see it. And she knows maybe at some point when she's in the back of his car, she's talking about what she recalls before passing out. She's like, I'm in there, I'm talking with fireflies. And then she quiets and she doesn't say what happens next. And so, and I know that there's been a lot of differences between the game and the show. But I will say that I almost got the vibe just from watching the show that Ellie actually maybe did make the choice to go under and to sacrifice herself from the greater good, and Joel perhaps violated that choice. And so when Ellie is very clearly knowing like that Joel destroyed everything for her, that she had already made a choice and that Joel was violating that choice. That's a vibe that I got from it. I don't know if that's 100%, but like that would be an interesting twist to me.
Yeah,
as if she had already made that choice.
Yeah, I don't know. That's cool. It's one of those things like by omission that you kind of have to guess for yourself for sure. I think it was also cool how, again, going back into that removal of choice here, doesn't Joel flat out ask her? Yeah, a few scenes before that when they're, before they get captured by the Fireflies, they're kind of just hanging out. And, after they see the giraffe and everything, he just says, hey, we can turn back, and he gives her that choice. And she says, no, after everything I've been through, after all the people that have lost their lives, we have to keep going. And she makes that decision. So I think it's almost sad to see how in the very last moment, Joel kind of takes that choice from her and says, you know, even though you've done all this, even though I know what your choice would be, even though I know what you would choose if you were awake, I can't let you go through with this.
Yeah, and that kind of touches on some of the macro themes that I know we talked about in our first episode, which this is the third episode. In our first live stream, we talked about episodes 1 through 6, because we started halfway through the season. But in that first live stream discussion that we had, I was like, you know, the theme of the kids are the future, and the kids will save us, et cetera, et cetera. And now Joel being sort of the older generation and Ellie being the future, it's almost like the past is holding the future back in some ways. And that's because of what the past older generations have experienced, being Joel's trauma with his actual daughter. So yeah, I thought that maybe from a thematic standpoint, that was something that I've kind of been noodling on, is like all the ways in which Gen X and like boomers and all of that, like all the older generations have sort of like prevented the growth and the betterment of society. Can you hear my daughter?
Yeah, it's all good. It's not too bad.
Have prevented the growth and betterment of society, and that our generation has tried to implement because of their own outdated ideals and their own generational
also,
trauma.
I guess the impact that it has on, you know, how we formulate our choices and how we act as adults. You hear this a lot, especially when we talk about college tuitions and house prices and stuff. You know, the decisions that the previous generation made impacts us, and oh man, how, you know, it's just very interesting to hear the dynamic of two different generations kind of trying to compare apples to oranges when it can't be the case, you know. So I think that's definitely seen here. You can't come in with your own biases and expect to make the same decisions. Yeah, for sure. Okay. Any other topics you want to touch on real quick? I don't think we really talked about Marlene in here. I think she brings a completely different aspect to this whole decision making. Obviously she is, and she touches on this obviously before, but she was there when her mom died. She was the first person to kind of take Ellie in. So when Joel says to her as he gets up from the hospital bed, he says, you know, you have no idea what I'm going through. You have no idea what this is like. She says, I actually do. I mean, I believe it. I think that a lot of Ellie's life has kind of been maybe observed from a distance by Marlene, and she may have had Ellie's best interests at heart. The one thing I'm a little bit curious about is how much did Marlene know about Ellie's immunity? Because I suspect that when we first kind of see that scene where Anne dies, her mom, I think, Marlene may have had some suspicions as to when Ellie was born, but I don't think she could have known that she had this immunity towards cordyceps. So I don't know. I mean, I guess what I'm kind of going back and forth on is, did Marlene protect Ellie and keep her close so that she could really understand whether Ellie was special because of this situation? Or was this kind of found out later? Because obviously the whole Riley situation where they got bit happened only, like a week or two before we see Joel and kind of that interaction happens. So I'm curious to know how much, or I guess we could speculate in terms of how much she really knew about what Ellie was and how special she was.
So the first time we see Ellie in the show, again, don't know if it's the same in the game, but the first time we see Ellie in the show, she is with Marlene and she's chained up, and Marlene comes and checks on her every couple hours to say your ABCs and like count to 10 and like see if she's losing any mental faculty, and she's not. So I don't think Marlene came out of the situation with Ellie and her mom when Ellie was born knowing that Ellie had an immunity. But what's interesting to me is, how did Marlene let Ellie fall into the hands of Fedra in the first place, knowing who she was and who her best friend was and promising to protect her, and she lets her fall into the hands of who Marlene would have seen as the enemy, right? So I'm kind of curious, like, how all that came to be.
I mean, we can only speculate, but I think it may not have been, falling into the hands. I mean, it may have been, absolutely, but I think more likely, maybe Marlene saw this as the safest place for Ellie, and maybe she was put into their care so that she could have a more normal life. I don't know. I mean, obviously we have to speculate on this one.
But that would be interesting then, because then it would be Marlene almost admitting to some degree that the Fireflies are not what's best. You know what I mean?
Yeah. They're a resistance group. I mean, at the core, that's what they are,
Right.
Whether they're doing the right thing or not. But actually, I was thinking about this too. I know we didn't really touch on the science of, the cordyceps, but to me, this kind of, when I first saw it, I was like, okay, this is kind of how maybe a vaccine works. You kind of microdose. So you've got a small amount of these cordyceps going into Ellie as she's right before she's being born. They go into her brain, and then any subsequent, I guess, cordyceps that go into the body see whatever's in the brain and say, okay, cool, the host has already been inhabited. This is good. I don't have to attack it anymore. I guess, I don't know. I mean, if you were to find that out, wouldn't you want to run tests? Like, this is your golden goose egg, right? Like, you're gonna immediately go and extract whatever part of this is, which is keeping her immune, that potentially kills her. Wouldn't you want to? I don't know. I mean, this, morality aside, wouldn't you try and replicate it? Maybe have, if you're Fedra, you see that, or even the Fireflies, you try and see, okay, how did this happen? I'm not saying go and have pregnant women get bit, but
that's the only way to test it, though. Right?
Yeah. It's just weird. Like, why go to the, and people correct me if I'm wrong here, but what's the likelihood you extract whatever it is that's keeping her immune? How do you then, replicate this for the masses? How do you replicate it so that you and I can get this vaccine? I know that there's a lot of unanswered questions here, and obviously this is just a series. We don't have to get too deep into it, but would you really go to this extent to potentially kill the only immune person that you know of to maybe or maybe not create a vaccine, or would you go a different route? I don't know. I mean, it just seems like a huge escalation to me.
But I will say, like, times are tough, and it's the apocalypse, and like it's not like you have the luxury of, because we also know that, like, Fireflies are on the run. Like we saw 3 episodes prior at this point, that their last location got compromised and they had to move out in a like really quickly, right? So it like, I can't fault them for not wanting to find more humane methods of testing this potential vaccine. But, like, if you're willing to kill somebody for the cause, I'm like, Marlene, put your money where your mouth is. Get pregnant, and then during delivery get bit and see what happens. Like, if you're willing to sacrifice someone else, you got to be willing to sacrifice yourself first.
Yeah, well, that's the question. We see questionable morality. I think you can argue what Marlene's morals are and whether they're better than Joel's. But she even says it towards the end. She's like, I made a promise. I kept her safe. Was it to ultimately sacrifice her, or not? That's
raise her
like
a pig. Raise her like a pig for slaughter.
Exactly.
And she didn't know that she was going to have to do that. You know what I mean? It was, I think what is telling is that Marlene, by the beginning of the season, when she tells Joel to take Ellie with him and protect Ellie at the beginning of the series, she already knows Ellie's fate, because she made that decision at that point in time, not in the future. When she found out that Ellie was infected, and the only way to actually test the cordyceps was to drill into the brain, that's when she handed her over to Joel. And I also wonder too if maybe to some degree Marlene didn't want to get emotionally attached because she came in to this whole situation with fucking, what'd she say, 5 guards, and like she traveled this distance that she would have traveled with Ellie anyways with more protection, but she handed them off to Joel instead. And I'm like, why? You know what I mean? Like, is that like a loophole? Is that like a plot hole to some degree, or is that like her not wanting to have some kind of emotional connection to this person who already matters to her because it's her best friend's daughter, and she just doesn't want to further connect herself with Ellie because she knows that that'll happen on a 5-month journey.
Yeah, and the question there is, does she choose Joel? Obviously, he's capable. You know, he's shown that he's incredibly capable at staying alive and, you know, killing people. Does she choose him because he's proven that he can kind of separate himself and distance himself as he did in the first few episodes? Could she have known that he would build up a connection like this and treat her like his own daughter? Because obviously at the end she does say, you know, I understand how you feel. And maybe now's a good time to touch on it. There was something that they didn't include in the series that was in the game. There was these little recordings that you kind of go through when, you know, after you kind of get your weapons and everything and you kill those guards, which gives you a little bit of insight into what Marlene was kind of thinking. And there was one, I think it was like, let me see if I can find it here. She was basically apologizing to Anne for basically saying like, hey, you'll see your daughter soon. Like, I'm sorry, I tried to keep her safe, but you know, this is what's going to happen. And it's, I don't know, it's really good insight into maybe the internal struggle that Marlene has that we don't really touch on too much, because, you know, we know Joel's resolve in protecting Ellie at all costs, but maybe Marlene is kind of is more difficult just because she maybe does see herself as a motherly figure towards Ellie, and she's been kind of this observer from afar, where she's kind of just played the pawns and kept her safe, but not really been as involved as she might seem. And again, that's a conscious choice that she has made for the greater good. She has this responsibility towards Ellie and her mom, but also she has a responsibility towards the Fireflies. And you know, there may be other kind of questionably moral reasons, or they may not be. May not be. But she kind of acknowledges how Joel feels in that moment, and yeah, it's something that they kind of touch on a little bit more in the game that I don't see too much, but obviously we still kind of get that. The other thing I was going to say is actually, yeah, never mind.
I was going to say that sounds to me like a storytelling mechanic based on the medium, because we do get to explore that in a little bit more depth on film. But what's interesting, I'd be curious about is in the game, who is it that's interacting with those recordings? Is it Joel as he's slowly learning Ellie's fate along the way? And does Joel walk into that situation in the game knowing what's going to happen? Is that something that happens in the game? Yeah,
he kind of, as he's trying to find her, he's slowly starting to understand that things aren't as black and white as they seem. And he's kind of, I think it kind of humanizes Marlene in that moment, because it's not this easy choice that he believes she took it as. So it's more of just getting inside the head of one of the characters.
Gotcha. Cool. So I also want to chat about the giraffe scene, because I think I was watching the Oscars, and then I get a text from you and you're like, they put the giraffe scene in. I was like, I don't know what that means. But it sounds cool. There's going to be giraffes in this episode. Getting into a little bit of like the symbolism of what the giraffes meant, because I'm like, why they put monkeys in one episode and then they put giraffes in another? And I don't know, when I saw the monkeys, just the first metaphor that comes to my mind is like, not my monkeys, not my circus. And it's just so how far Joel has come by the time they come across the monkeys, which is like, he's like, he was kind of like, your cargo was not my fucking problem, like all that stuff. And then now he's landing on these giraffes, and they're a bit more slow moving. They're a bit more peaceful. And I'm like, I went to Disney World 2 weeks ago, and my kid was like completely floored by the fact that like giraffes exist and how big and beautiful they are. And so I'm kind of like, there's this quiet moment of like pause and reflection and sort of seeing, I think, the beauty in the world that we get to have right before our hearts get a little bit almost ripped out of us with Ellie's fate. Doesn't quite fully go there, but there's just this moment of, I think, sort of pause and seeing the ability for giraffes to adapt to this kind of apocalyptic environment, and sort of maybe being a symbol for nature finding a way, to use the Jurassic Park reference, but like also sort of the beauty that can thrive in this chaos. And I think that the moment between Joel and Ellie in that scene with the giraffes also reflects, I think, a beautiful moment as well of how far they've come and how far they've adapted, and how Joel has been able to find beauty in this world after losing his daughter. That is my analysis of the giraffes, but I wanted to hear, like, you were fucking stoked on it. And I'm sure it was like wild to see giraffes in a video game, because it's not like one of those creatures you regularly see in games.
Yeah, I mean, I think the reason why it was so powerful in the game was because, you know, you fought all these infected, you fought all these raiders and people, and then all of a sudden you have this moment where you're just like, you know, Ellie drops the ladder and she's like, oh my God, come see this. And I'm just like, oh shit, what is this? Like, what else do I have to fight now? And then she's looking at these giraffes in this big open plain, you know, what used to be a highway, you know, just, you know, streets, everything, big buildings.
Yeah, I think it was actually a baseball field.
Okay.
Because there's like bleachers in the background somewhere.
Yeah, and I remember there was this little, you know, puddle and everything. And to me, I was actually trying to rack my brain about what the giraffes symbolize. And I think to me, it's really just that innocence. You know, they're slow, they're friendly. You see them come up and eat the leaves. It's worth mentioning that this scene is pretty much identical in the game. So it was powerful, I'd say. It really slows everything down, and you really do get to appreciate kind of the beauty that is in the world. And I know we touched on it kind of in previous discussions, where nature is thriving. You know, you see people dying, humans are fighting each other, but then you see animals retaking the world. You see vegetation start to sprout up. Everything else is thriving, and I think this is a moment where you can say, okay, maybe that's not a bad thing. And I think back on what David said in the last episode that we kind of talked about, which was, you know, maybe this virus, this infection isn't such a bad thing, because it's nature's way of fighting back. We are, you know, not to be cliche and stuff, but we are the biggest virus on this planet. You know, look at all the pollution we cause, and you know, everything that we've done to this planet that gives us life, and you know, everything we need to survive. The cordyceps are nature's way of fighting back. So even in these moments where you see death and destruction and pain, all these horrible things, you can kind of look back and say, yeah, humans suck, but you know, there's beauty in this life. And there's a lot that's thriving and really sprouting from this horrible thing. So again, back to that, you can find humanity in the most unexpected places.
And one thing that you were talking about was how the giraffes symbolize innocence. Do you think, first of all, is Ellie innocent? But second of all, do you think that Ellie represents innocence as well? Because she's kind of, or at the very least, ignorance, right? Because she's kind of going into this situation and being like, I'm excited to kind of fulfill my destiny a little bit. And she, I guess to some degree, just like doesn't deserve to die, right? She's like this innocent person who never did. I mean, I don't know if she has done anything wrong. I keep thinking back and I'm like, she has, but it's been like for survival. But I'm wondering if there's maybe a parallel to like the innocence that you're seeing in these giraffes, and then also the innocence of Ellie herself as a character.
I definitely think that, and I don't necessarily know if it's the ignorance or the innocence, but she is so hopeful. And I think the saddest part to me in this episode was really her in the car where she's, asking what happened, and you see her kind of turn away from Joel when he says, oh yeah, they found, there's dozens of people like you and it's not going to work out. So for her, she's put so much emphasis on and hope on being the solution. And she had this resolve to say, okay, we're at the finish line here. We've done everything we could. I killed people. I sacrificed so much. Please, please, please don't let it be in vain. Please get me, let there be a resolution. And when she understands, or she's being told that this is not the case, it's like that hope is kind of ripped out of her. Like, what do I do now? And that may be naivety. It may be, I don't know. It maybe that like innocence of she's kind of wising up to the world. Maybe things aren't what they seem. Maybe she's realizing that Joel lied to her. And in that moment, she's like, this doesn't seem right. I don't know necessarily, but she's kind of grown up in that moment. And it really just hits her that, maybe there isn't hope.
And it also, I think, touches on this idea of like, your parents aren't always right, and like sometimes the people that you look up to make choices that you question, and you're like, why would you make that choice? But ultimately she trusts him. But you're right. I think that there is, a degree of her not being able to process to some degree the fact that she has put all her trust in Joel, and he has been good to her this whole time. He's been honest with her this whole time. And now they're in this position of he's lying to her, and he's ripped away all of her sense of identity to some degree, because she's like, I am the cure. And like she has probably been processing that this whole journey of like, I'm special, I'm important. And then Joel comes in and fucks up the world and is like, no, what makes you different, what makes you special needs to be hidden, it needs to be repressed, and we need to hide that from the world. And I hear that and I think like, man, like if you take what makes somebody special as a parent, what makes your kid special, and you rip that away from them, that is like the most fucked up thing that you can do as a parent, because it's like the thing that makes you different, let's hide that away. There's a really good short film by I think it's like Disney and Pixar. It's called Float, and it's a metaphor for kids with autism. But have you seen this short Pixar film?
Not this one, no.
Cool. So I get to mansplain it to you.
Nice.
So there's this short film by Pixar that won a bunch of awards, and it's this kid who can float and fly, basically. And it's there's no dialogue until the very, very end of it. But the dad, as the kid gets older, he's like, oh wow, like my kid can fly, this is like a beautiful thing. And then other parents are weirded out by it, and they're like, what the fuck? So he starts putting rocks, which is a metaphor for medication, starts putting rocks in this kid's backpack so that he won't float away. And then at the very end, the kid ditches the backpack and is like in the park, and he's playing, he's flying around, he's freaking out all the other parents, and this dad grabs him. And then there's this moment of that I think any parent of an autistic child or any family member of someone with autism will recognize as a tantrum. And he just screams like, why can't you be normal? And then the kid cries or whatever. And then finally the dad just lets the kid float and be the kid. And all the parents are like weirded out by it, but he's just like, fuck the world, I don't care what they think. And that is such a powerful thing as a parent to see that, but then to also see Joel go the complete fucking opposite way of that kind of story and be like, the thing that makes you special needs to be hidden, it needs to be repressed, and it needs to be hidden from you too. Like, I'm taking away any opportunity for you to shine, and to put your value out there, because I'm afraid of what's going to happen to you if people realize how special you are. And that's been a thing across the whole show, is like repressing what makes a kid different and repressing a kid's identity, especially on the part of the parent.
Yeah. And I mean, I think we can kind of agree that it's misguided. But at the same time, you have these these moments that make Joel who he is, and you kind of have to say, okay, well, I don't blame you for making these decisions. I can't blame you for taking the path that you did because you think that this is the only way or this is the right way to go about it. So it's tough. It's tough for sure.
Yeah, and as a dad myself, again, I'm sitting here and I think I'm passing a little bit of judgment on Joel and his decision making and say that's bad parenting. But at the end of the day, dude, I would do the same fucking thing if my kid was the cure to cordyceps and they had to kill her. I'd be like, no fucking way, find some other way. Like, we've managed to make it this far. You figure it out. Like, I'm not doing this. Like, my daughter's not worth everything. So it's just, I don't know. Like, at the same time, I think the overall theme and what that takes away is that, like, parenting is very difficult. And raising your kid in the world is a dangerous prospect because you never know what's going to kill them next. And you're going to fuck up and you're going to make bad decisions and you're going to be wrong a lot of the time in how you parent. And you kind of just have to like live with that. Again, trying to empathize with Joel here, but like knowing that the decisions that you made were the best decisions that you could possibly make for your child at that time, even if it's not what the child wants.
Yeah. And honestly, you can't pass judgment without being in that situation. Like you said, I mean, you can talk about it all you want of how, I'd let my child make this decision and figure it out for themselves. But at the end of the day, you have this impression that you are right and that you know better. And as a result, you're going to make those decisions for your child and you're going to do what you think is right. I
think about that episode. Did you watch The Office? Were you like an Office fan?
Yeah.
The ethics training day episode where they're like, ethics is deciding, do you steal in order to feed your family? And Michael Scott's like, I would not steal, and I also would not let my family go hungry. And I feel like that's how a lot of us think about these sort of abstract situations as parents, is like, oh, well, if I was in that position, I would make the absolute right choice, and there would be no moral dilemma about it. And it's like, no, because I mean, even Camille's not even 3 yet, but it's just like there are times when we have to make a choice of how we handle a situation. It's like she's like, I want a cookie, and you're like, I'm not going to repress my child and deprive her of a cookie, because then she's going to grow up wanting more cookies and she's going to act out and she's just going to always desire cookies all the time because it's the thing that I've deprived her of. So I'm not going to restrain it, but I'm also going to be a good parent and she's only going to eat vegetables. Like, you can't live in with your feet in both worlds. You can't be right all the time. And so that's what I see coming through with Joel is, he oftentimes, I think, gets in Ellie's way. Maybe not at first, it's not as obvious, but he's, overall kind of hiding her identity from the world in a way that stops her from kind of sharing with the world how special she is. But then that becomes the nuclear decision that he makes at the end of the day that deprives not just the world of the cure that she can provide, but also provides her of any sense of identity whatsoever and any sense of being special. Yeah,
I mean, like I said, I haven't played the Last of Us 2, so I don't know where the story goes, but obviously they set it up in such a way that there's got to be something crazy that happens, and it's interesting how Ellie starts off with being this cargo that we keep referring to. She starts off by not having a choice. She's gone through this process where Marlene has made choices for her, then Joel makes choices for her. She's gotten to the point now where she's shown that she can hold her own. She's made choices to protect and save Joel. And now Joel has given her the illusion of choice. And she has, in her own eyes, kind of gotten to a point where she can make these choices and she believes she knows what's right. So I think taking that away from her is really a catalyst to something that pushes her over the edge. To where she is now, she feels that and she's like, okay, I have to regain control. So
yeah, and we're not going to know what that is, I think, for a while. I mean, you said you haven't played part 2.
I haven't
and I haven't seen season 2, so I'm really excited. I don't know if anyone is watching this right now has seen it and wants to leave a comment of like, this is generally what we can expect. Keep it spoiler free, but this is generally what we can expect. Also, just side note, this is my ADHD brain, but Look the way my arm is lining up with Joel's arm.
I saw that too. Yeah.
Yeah, I did that on purpose. I was like, yeah.
Hey,
but
I
yeah,
noticed mine kind of goes with Ellie's too. Even though we're
or if you do it like this, it looks like I've got that weird arm from Scary Movie.
Scary Movie too. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's your good arm, dude.
That's my other hand's not strong enough. But yeah, dude, there's a lot of, I think, choices and trusting kids to make their own choices that Joel is just showing like he's not ready for. And I think a lot of parents just aren't ready to let their kids make their own choices. Fun story. This past weekend, we went to a bunch of the kids from the daycare. One of the moms set up this thing where it was like, we're all going to go to the museum and like all the kids are going to play and stuff. It was like not school sponsored. It was like a weekend, but like a parent emailed the rest of the parents and was like, let's all go do this. And it was just like so interesting because I'm sitting there talking with the dads, as cliche as that fucking sounds, but I'm like sitting there with all the dads and we're chatting about like our approach to screen time and our approach to this. And I'm like, I'm pretty lax on a lot of shit. Like a lot of these dads are like, absolutely not, like you get 2 hours of screen time. And then there's some parents who are like only on the weekends. But some of those kids are like some of them, I mean, all the kids are in Camille's class. So they're all like 2 to 3, but they have other kids that are a little bit older, and they're talking about the ways in which they open their kid up to decision making, but also the ways in which they restrict certain decision making. And I get it because one of the parents brought up the concerns around TikTok and the role of predators in that world, and I was like, yeah, that's something that thankfully I don't have to worry about right now. My kid isn't on fucking TikTok, but I see the ways in which they're repressing their kids. And I just think to myself, I don't want to say this to them, but I think to myself, you're only going to make it worse for yourself, because now your kid is thinking, dad's mad that I'm on TikTok because he's afraid that I'm going to do something wrong or I'm going to talk to the wrong person. So I'm just going to have a TikTok and not tell him about it. And then what's going to happen is your kid is actually going to be in danger and not be able to reach out to you for help because they're afraid that you're going to get mad at them. And that is something that maybe is why Ellie doesn't speak truth to Joel and speak truth to Power in that moment, because she's afraid of how Joel will react if she calls him on his shit. But I think where we're going to see this story start to go a little bit is because Joel has proven that he doesn't trust her to make her own decisions. She's going to act out in some way where she starts making decisions without even telling Joel that she's doing that. And that's going to put her into more harm's way than it would have had Joel been like, look, I just couldn't live without you. And I made this decision and it was a mistake and it was bad and I did a fucked up thing, but I did it because I love you. And maybe it wasn't right, but that's what I did and that's why I did it. Can we move forward? That's not a conversation that he lets Ellie have. He says, I'm deciding what's best for you. And this is going to be your life now. And we're going to sit quietly with my brother Tommy on this compound and we're going to be safe for the rest of our days. And it's just like, it's not fair.
Yeah, no, I definitely see that. And I think you bring up some really good points about that. And I'd like to think it's different because you kind of see his gradual shift in temperament and he starts to open up personally, because I think that's powerful, because if he starts to open up, then he understands that maybe she'll open up to him, more than she already has. And they've had some really candid moments, especially when they're sitting down and he obviously tells her about, how he tried to kill himself, about Sarah and a lot of aspects that we hadn't heard from prior to this moment. So obviously he does trust her, but then he kind of takes a few steps back by removing that level of choice that he kind of, we've obviously been talking about it for a while now, but the choices that he seems to be giving her. So it's weird to see, or it'll be interesting to see kind of how she reacts to that.
Yeah. And just to close out the conversation on that part of it, because I think we've been harking on this for a while, but it all goes back to Joel's personal trauma and how his experience is like, I've lost a kid and therefore I refuse to lose you. It has nothing to do with Ellie per se and necessarily what's best for Ellie. It's Joel saying, when my daughter died, I was going to kill myself and it was the end of me because I am a dad and like that's who I am. And if I were to lose you, I'd probably end up in the same position of wanting to kill myself again. So I can't have that happen to me, and therefore I'm not going to let you make decisions that could harm you and affect me very personally in that way. It felt very, I think, a bit more selfish than good.
Well, it's interesting too, because you bring that up, and I just remembered, if you think back on the first episode where he's carrying Sarah, she had, I guess, sprained her ankle, and then obviously when she gets shot at the end, it's really interesting to see it come full circle when he's carrying Ellie in the same exact way into that parking garage. And to me, as I was thinking about this, I actually just remembered, in my mind, if I was him, I'm just like, not again. This is not happening again. So to him, he's like, all right, I'm not losing another one. This is my daughter. It's not happening again. So if that means taking away her choice, if that means doing what I have to keep her alive, I'm gonna do it. So yeah, just made me think of that.
Yeah, and a very selfish decision. So going into this episode, I think what we had talked about in our first live stream was like, what does The Last of Us actually mean? And to me, what it meant is that when all of humanity is gone, what remains, right? And that's what was sort of the conversation piece, is like, there's moments of hope that remains, but there's also moments of like the best and the worst of humanity kind of coming out. And that's what remains of us, is our best selves and our worst selves. And hope, I think, is what Ellie and Joel's journey has been about, is what remains as hope. But now I almost look at it in a more pessimistic light, because for Joel, it's what remains of Joel when his humanity is gone. And that is, I think, what we see a bit with that suicide attempt of like, there's nothing that remains of him when everything else is gone. He's just a stone cold fucking killer. And he is having a crisis of identity to some degree in that regard. And so The Last of Us, to me, with hindsight, full 2020, and seeing kind of the negative note that this whole season has ended on, The Last of Us to me is what we are willing to do to preserve what's left of us, and how far we're willing to go to preserve something. And if we see that thing as good, are we willing to do countless bad acts to save one good thing? And that is the moral conundrum that this show and this title presents to us.
Yeah, and also, what are the consequences on toward, I guess, The Last of Us? Like, who is The Last of Us? Are we including Joel and Ellie in this, or is it just Ellie? Because if Ellie is kind of our last hope, and she's this morally, I guess, innocent and pure person that she's kind of shown herself to be throughout the series, and then there's Joel who's misguided but still wants the best for her. Is he against, like, are we still including him in the title of The Last of Us, or is he now an outsider and Ellie is now against him in this battle of morality? Like, who are you trying to save? Who are you trying to fight against? We've covered a lot of these other groups here. Like, are they included? Like, where does Ellie go from here, essentially?
Right. And I think, when I think about why go on this exploration of what is The Last of Us, who are The Last of Us, and what remains, like, you have to think of the broader metatextual context of this, right? It's not like we're actually in a post-apocalypse. And in 2014, when the game came out, we weren't in an apocalypse. So it's like, why go on this exploration of what's at the heart of humanity when the world is not necessarily falling apart? And I think that that's where sort of there are lessons from the show that are ubiquitous across all types of situations and all forms of humanity, regardless of the context. And that's what I try to look at when I watch this show, and I try to understand and unpack, what does The Last of Us mean? It's not, literally who are the last remaining people on Earth and what are they doing, but it's more of an exploration to look at what matters most to us and what is important, and like at the end of it, like, what does it mean to be human? And in this final episode, I'm, the whole way leading up to this, it's been, again, about hope, but now it's just about, I think, to be human is to act in self-preservation a bit. And sometimes that's a good thing. Sometimes it's a bad thing. Morals are just something that we tack onto that to help define it.
Yeah. And I don't know. I think this is a kind of phrase that I've always liked, because everyone's going to have a different perspective, right? Like I always think everything is relative, and you and I have had some really interesting conversations about, is time travel possible and stuff like that. If, just moments that we see of like relativity, things that, even just looking out into the stars and saying, okay, this instance of what I'm seeing is different from what someone else is seeing millions of light years away, things like that, So if we take these groups of people that in their own little self-contained bubbles, they think that they are doing what's right for humanity. Whether you take Fedra, you take the Fireflies, you take, Ellie and Joel separately, like they all have their own truth, their own relative morality, and their own relative, almost purity. You can argue that in a way, Joel is pure for his love for Ellie, and he'll do anything to save her. You can argue that Marlene has her own purity and morality for doing what she thinks is right, and sacrificing everything for the greater good. Everything has a relative perspective that needs to be kind of identified and looked at separately. And I think that's what makes the title The Last of Us so interesting to me, because you can argue, like, who are the last of us? Are we the last of us? Are they the last of us? And why? Is nature the last of us? What perspective are you looking at, and where does that take you? So I don't know that necessarily has an answer, but if we're looking at it in terms of Ellie, I think that her story is really just beginning, and I think that she has a lot to unpack. But I think hopefully we still see that level of purity from her. But yeah, it'll be really interesting to see how her decisions change and how her views on humanity kind of evolve. Hopefully in season 2. I have no clue what to expect, and I love that.
I know, and that's the fun part. I think maybe somebody who's watching this who has played the games might know those answers, and like, I'm just really happy and blessed that I don't know those answers, and I'm excited for you to play part 2 and just start writing down your thoughts. I want to say let's not wait till season 2 to do this again, but maybe we'll have to. But speaking about to some of your points about like what is The Last of Us? Is it the Fireflies? Is it Fedra? Is it whatever? I think they all represent like different aspects of humanity, right? And I think we touched on this in our first stream, but let's just bring it full circle and revisit those ideas. The Fireflies, as I kind of saw it in that first streaming episode that we did, was, the Fireflies, the light in the darkness. That's what they symbolize. They are moments of truth, enlightenment, hope in a dark world. Now, I look at that, and then I look at kind of where Fireflies ended up, because this is my first big exposure to Fireflies and their morality system and how they approach things. And I see how they would consider themselves that, but it is very much, it's not without its flaws, that mentality, because they've shown us that you can't preserve good without doing something bad, because that's what it takes for good to thrive. You can't just be all good all the time. You can't just be all hope all the time. You have to fight for that hope, and you have to be willing to sacrifice things that matter to you in order to keep that hope alive, and to continue to be that light in the darkness. And I can't help but think, do you create darkness like around you in the process of doing that? That's kind of where my head is at with the Fireflies.
Well, it's interesting that you bring that up, because this episode was actually titled Light in the Darkness. So I think obviously we knew we were going to see a lot with the Fireflies. And when I read that title, I was almost thinking, like, is this kind of foreshadowing, how they say go towards the light, when you're ready to pass or kind of move on? is this the foreshadowing that we see with Ellie kind of going towards that light, to save the greater good? I think I'm with you though, man. I think the Fireflies, just like with anything, I mean, who knows? We can speculate, obviously. If the Fireflies make the vaccine, are they gonna, I don't know, hold it for themselves? Are they gonna charge people? Are they gonna not give it to Fedra people? What's gonna happen?
They're gonna turn it into a treatment rather than a cure, so that people
Exactly.
coming back to the well
Yeah.
and paying, and they're gonna hustle the insurance companies.
Yeah, I mean, and that's, now without the regulations that we kind of take for granted, there's even if we kind of extrapolate to our lives, there's a lot of difficulties with that kind of stuff. But I don't know. I mean, obviously we can only speculate, but yeah.
Yeah, and I think what starts to show the light in the darkness, right? Once you've been all consumed by the light, it's blinding. You go from being in complete shadow and you see that sliver of hope, and then you get to the hope and there's nothing but light, and it's blinding, and it blinds you to, I think, your own bullshit a little bit. I think the Fireflies are kind of high on their own shit, and not really recognizing sort of their own ways in which they're depriving people of their humanity and depriving people of their freedoms and their choices in service of a good that they see as the greater good. And I can't help but think about the political divide of that we see today of like Republicans I'm just gonna say conservatives and liberals, of both sides think they're doing what's right. One is a bit more militant and conservatory and protect what little we have left, while the other is very what's good for the goose is good for the gander, and we need to prop up all types of people, and equality of opportunity as well as equality of outcome. And I don't know, I see sort of that conflict there sort of represented, and I can't help but think like, man, I've never lived in a more politically divided time than we do now. But maybe some of this shit is actually just core to how humans are, and this tribalism that we participate in. And ultimately we lean towards, I think, or affiliate with factions that we believe to have our personal best interests at heart. And sometimes in the case of Joel and Ellie, it might not be either one, because what's good for them is not necessarily, what's good for Ellie is not to die. But what's good for everybody is for Ellie to die. And so Joel takes Ellie on sort of this like independent streak. And then also to be raised in Fedra and to grow up to fucking stand around with a gun while other people shovel shit. Like, that's not a quality of life either. You're just waiting around to die, as we saw with Ellie and her friend. So I don't know. I think that there's, some kind of core divide within humanity that leads to some of these sort of this political polarization that we've seen, and that when put into a survival situation, those extremities are not quelled, but more exacerbated.
Yeah. Well, and I would definitely argue that you can't have one without the other. I think that's obviously what makes democracy what it is the ability to kind of voice your opinions and have these differing opinions that come together, and you create something that's, ideally it's fair for everyone. It's something that's a happy medium between these two kind of polarizing aspects. Obviously, this isn't necessarily the case with Fedra and the Fireflies, but when there is conflict, if it's done in a healthy way, it comes out with oftentimes, I don't know, this might be completely kind of idealistic to say, but you come out with something that is a happy medium, a compromise. So in this case, I don't know if that's possible, but I think it's something that Ellie wants to believe in. Like we kind of talked about, who knows what the Fireflies would do? Who knows if they would even be able to extract this vaccine from her? Who knows if they would be able to succeed? But it gives her something to believe in. And at this point, that's all you can really hope for in this kind of world of pain and suffering, when there's not many things to believe in.
Yep. And she wanted to believe in herself, but Joel kind of took that away from her by not giving her the opportunity to. Yeah, I don't know. Is there anything else you want to touch on here?
No, I think we really closed it out well, man. I think this was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I might work on maybe a script for just like the show in general and just do a video and take a lot of our learnings and hopefully push people to this conversation. Would love to have you at least review that script and like put your input in, especially as someone who's played the game, or I might just play the game and then like make the video. I don't know. But dude, I've really loved having you on this show. It's been really easy for me to process this content rather than sit down for 8 hours straight and edit a video, and then it's like 3 a.m. and then I got to get up at like 6 or 7 and then have to deal with editing. So this has just been for me easy content to make. It's just to shoot the shit. It's not as engaging, obviously. I think we only got like 100 views on our first one, but it's fun, and it's also good to shoot the shit with somebody who is smart and also has almost the same birthday as me, because then that just means like you're even smarter. So yeah, I don't know. It's been good having you on the show. I really appreciate you doing this with me. It's been fun. And I'm sad that this is ending, but maybe if people like this, I will do a poll to see if people want more of this content, want more of you on here. And if the people speak and they don't like you, bye-bye. But yeah, no, I would love the opportunity to do this more. Maybe we'll pick out another show. I'm currently watching The English.
Very nice.
Have you watched that?
I haven't, no, but it's actually on my list.
So fucking good if you're into Westerns. It's like I haven't seen a Western as good as this since the Once Upon a Time in the West.
Well, I will be waiting for your review, and hopefully you'll get a video out there soon. I don't know if you're planning on making one, but maybe this is my request to have one out there.
Okay, let me just tell you what I've had in the pipeline for months. Number one is BoJack Horseman. People have been asking about it. I guess I will just address it here with you. Have you watched BoJack Horseman?
I've seen the first maybe 2 seasons, and then I kind of fell off, but I need to get back into it, see what's up.
Yeah, it's heavily requested. I had never seen it. I finished season 1. I have thoughts, but I'm going to process the entirety of the series before I do a video on BoJack Horseman. But it's highly, highly requested, and I just want to do it right. And so I'm like, it's kind of like, to me, it's my it's going to be my big grand creation that's going to blow up my YouTube channel into 1 billion views. And so 1, I need to have a good backlog of content, but then 2, I also need to have a really, really smart points on it. So there's a lot of pressure that I put on myself for that. But yeah, maybe you can, if you're into BoJack, we can do that. But I also have a whole backlog of content that I've actually recorded and just not sat down and edited. So,
dude, I honestly like the format because it's been interesting. I mean, you can kind of tell them. We have kind of points, like talking points, but this is very unscripted. It's really cool to process live and really figure out what our thoughts are, because I actually get a lot of really good insight from you when we kind of talk through this stuff. So it's a different format. I think it's interesting. It's more vulnerable in a way because you can't just edit out saying some dumb shit. So
I say a lot of dumb shit that doesn't make it into videos.
So yeah, this is interesting, but I do like the format. So I guess we'll see if we're doing more in the future. Yeah,
well, this live stream was not did not have a lot of people in here commenting about things that they wanted to see us talk about, so
I guess this is it.
Maybe like if this ship blows up for some reason, people like do another one, we have a bunch of questions, maybe we could schedule one more Q&A, because I'm not quite ready to say goodbye. But yeah, well, I will say see you later.
All right, sounds good, man.
Because we'll see. It's less definite.
Yeah, well, this may be it for me, but if this is the last one, it's been a pleasure, man, and maybe we'll sync up for season 2. But if not, thanks for having me on there, man. It's been a blast.
Yeah, dude, absolutely. Well, it's been a blast having you. Looking forward to season 2 when we're definitely going to do this again. And yeah. Enjoy The Last of Us Part 2 game as you play it. Keep me in the loop on your feelings. No spoilers, but yeah, let's just keep shooting the shit.
Sounds good.
All right. And that is the end of the broadcast. Wait.
Oh.
End of the broadcast.